Welcome to Politics Done Right. I am your host, Egberto Williams. This is the progressive program that will take the mystery out of politics. This is the program that will encourage you to make sure government becomes we the people. Whether you are liberal, conservative, or otherwise, you get to air your point of view. Remember, you can also send me a tweet to EGBERTOWILLIES. That is, at Egberto Williams. Let us engage. It is politics done right.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Well, folks, welcome to one more edition of Politics Done Right. I'm Egberto Williams, your host. Thank you so kindly for spending this time with me. We are going to have a great show today. We are going to have a show that is special for more than one reason, and I have to explain it this way. Things are coming to a head in this country faster than one can believe. And the thing about it is, the great thing about it is we have a whole lot of people on the front lines. We have a whole lot of people that are mitigating the problems that are yet or that are going to occur. And what we are going to need is to make sure that going forward, everybody begins and remains engaged. One of the issues that today is a special day because whereas for those of you who listened to the program yesterday, you know we started the program on two issues, and the second issue that we started the program on had to do with a guaranteed employment. And as usual, given that this is your show, you had the ability to change that show, and you did. Now, today, same thing has occurred. Other people within the Harris County community have forced a change onto the show that we were going to have today. Today's show was going to be featuring the mainstream media and how it can have an effect on what we believe. Specifically, it had to do with Venezuela. We're going to cover that on the second part of the show still, but this subject that we are going to cover today is important. It does not only cover Houston, Texas. It does not only cover Harris County. It covers the entire country, and it is something that is occurring throughout the country that we have to be cognizant of. For those who have kids, it's of material interest to you. For those who don't have kids, it is of material interest to you as well, because we are a society that depends on everybody. Everybody must be a part of society. Everybody must be educated in society. So what is the program going to be about today? And interesting enough, I don't have it up on my screen yet because I had some technical difficulties. You guys always hear me talk about technical difficulties to get the program started. But anyhow, the title of the program today is Houston's Attempt. And I mean exactly what I'm going to say. It's going to be harsh to some, but I mean exactly what I'm going to say. And later on, it'll become quite evident. Houston's attempt to prostitute public schools and is the first part of the program. The second part is mainstream media false attack on Venezuela. Anyhow, the plutocracy, subtitle, the plutocracy is attacking from all sides, from school boards to media. The operative word is no longer just resist. The operative word as well is but fight. But you must fight on. And good for us, that is what we have on the line with us today that we're going to get to in a minute. Our first topic of the day is the prostitution of public schools. Last night, the Houston Independent School District held a meeting with the intention to vote on making 10 low-performing schools, public schools predominantly of color, into charter schools. The meeting erupted into chaos as brave parents and supporters attended. They had poignant questions and statements for the board. The board president eventually had the room cleared, denying their constituents both representation and their First Amendment rights. 2 heroes were arrested as they objected to the attempt of a public school coup, the prostitution of 10 public schools. Today, we discussed the event with Daniel Cohen, president of Indivisible Houston, who recorded the entire event, keeping those unable to attend informed in real time on the Indivisible Houston Facebook page. And the second topic of the day is the mainstream media calculated maligning of Venezuela. The blog of the week will detail that reality. Suffice it to say that Americans' impression of Venezuela is directly attributable to what the plutocracy wants you to believe to justify any potential action it sees fit. One of the reasons I am talking about Venezuela is I'm hearing the rumbles in the background, and I want Americans to be very well aware of what's happening to their southern neighbor and not have these people fool them into allowing some sort of an action that, just like they did in Panama, got a hell of a lot of people killed. But today, our special guest, Senor Daniel Cohen from Indivisible Houston, president of Indivisible Houston. How are you doing today, Daniel?
I'm doing all right because we're on the heels of making sure to spread the good work of peace and liberty and justice and equitable schooling and other things that people need in the world today. So I always feel better when we're taking action toward that. So I feel okay right now.
Well, that is great. Now, Daniel, what I want you to do for the people that are listening, and what I ask you to do it, how I am asking you to do it, Daniel, you're quite capable of doing so, is to give us the Houston Independent School District narrative, not only as it relates to Harris County, the Houston Independent School District, because this is a national issue. Please address it as you speak about it. Tell us specifically to Houston, but how does that apply to the folks around the country?
I would love to do that. So here's the top of the stack. It is time for a public education resurrection in the United States. There's a war on public education perpetrated by Betsy DeVos, Donald Trump, and all the Betsy DeVosses and Donald Trumps that are in local areas helping facilitate overreach and squelching of public education at every single level of government through every tactic necessary, whether it is stalling or stopping transparency or stopping protests or assembly or stopping strikes. And it's unfair. And it does not provide for an equitable environment, and it makes our country worse because it destroys public education. We saw that fight come to HISD, where
explain what HISD is. Remember, this is a national program.
Bad options.
This is a national program, Daniel. So when you say things like HISD, or there are people in Minnesota.
Oh, you got it.
Know,
okay,
yeah.
So I'll try to be clear. The Houston Independent School District is currently facing a series of bad options that were placed on the table by the passage of a bill through the Texas State Legislature. And that bill, House Bill 1842, has given them the option of partnering or chartering different schools or risking potential for state takeover. The position that we have taken as part of the Save Our Schools Coalition with other groups here, as well as many parents, teachers, and community advocates who filled the room last night, is that they should sue the TEA, the Texas Education Agency, basically the state of Texas, for discriminatory practices and failure to comply their own accountability standards and time standards as it is related to our state standardized test, which is the STAR test. They are killing these students' public educations. They are testing them to death. And we are not spending enough time on the things that really allow people to flourish in neighborhood schools. In this particular case, as should be no surprise to anyone, 10 black and brown schools in the Houston Independent School District were potentially on the chopping block for corporate partnerization and privatization at this meeting. And that's why everybody filled the room at Houston Independent School District's meeting last night.
Now, tell us exactly what happened out there yesterday, because this is important to show how your own government can turn on those that they should be serving. And when I say government, I'm talking about now the Houston Independent School Districts Board.
You got it. So I want everyone to stick with me. We're not going to do this soundbite style. So everybody settle up with a glass of cocoa, because I want to tell you the story, and it's a riveting one as for what happened last night.
Daniel, let me ask you to hold for a second. Daniel, let me ask you to hold. Let me ask you to hold for a second. I need to ask you to hold for a second. Folks, for those of you who are just joining us, this is an important conversation, not only here in Houston, but around the world, around the country. Please go ahead, if you are listening to this on Facebook, Facebook Live, please go ahead and share this right away. We need this specifically in Houston right now as well, for people to hear this, so that the next time they have a Houston Independent District Board meeting, that you guys can be out there and making sure that these guys represent you, and you come out to the defense of these 10 schools that they are trying to take over, privatize, and use as prostitutes to the corporation. Go ahead, Daniel.
So last night, starting at around 5 o'clock, there was an action. It was a faux funeral procession to get the attention of others, to let them know that the Texas Education Agency was trying to bring about the death of 10 neighborhood schools in black and brown communities. And we were calling for the HISD school board to have a backbone, to have a spine, to stand up against the Texas Education Agency's corporate partnerization and charterization of these 10 neighborhood schools, and calling for them to redirect funds into these neighborhood schools and sue the Texas Education Agency. They have grounds for it based on accountability standards and based on ongoing discrimination in their accountability standards, and not conforming to time limits that have actually been set in implementation of the test. So there is grounds for this suit. Instead of handing our schools over to the Texas Education Agency, we instead were calling for them to fight back, stand up and fight back against the national wave of charterization and privatization that came to Harris County. We marched into the building and respectfully filed in through funeral procession, being very clear about what our demands were, which was to sue the TEA and to stand up to the Texas Education Agency and make sure that the Houston Independent School District Board did that. We were asked to sit in the Houston Independent School District meeting room for 3 hours while they went through a closed session. Now, they have closed sessions on the agenda. Often they had one on the agenda for this particular circumstance, but usually they start them earlier than the public meeting. In this case, we were asked to wait. Normally, they waive a rule that says no food or drinks to allow you to bring water in. Tonight, they did not waive that rule. Or last night, they did not waive that rule. There were about half the chairs that you normally see. We were not allowed to have our assembly on HISD courtyard property. We had to have it outside of the gates. And when we did come in, there was twice the police presence outside and inside that they normally had. So we were in there for about 3 hours. At one point, we started chanting. We were asked to be silent. That was naturally adjusted to a position of allowing us to talk, but not getting, in their eyes, overly rowdy. But everybody had basically an ongoing conversation about what was happening that night. We waited there, like I said, 3 hours. At one point, 3 very nice women ordered us some pizzas. They did allow us to bring the pizzas in. And finally, the board meeting started off. And person after person stood up and said, no partnerships, no charters, no closures, no Texas Education Agency in our town, sue the TEA, and make sure to fight back and stand up and fight back against this national wave of charterization coming to our neighborhood and national war on public education. And at one point in the evening, somebody stood up and gave a speech. And when she gave that speech, there was a moment where she was asked to step down from the microphone because she'd gone over time. It's worth noting that people go over the time at HISC meetings. It happens when you're trying to get in your last few words. And it's also worth noting that while there are decorum rules, such as not saying HISC trustees' names to protect them, I suppose, and not clapping and things like that, people usually wave their hands. There was some clapping, but for all practical purposes, I am telling you, the meeting was under control. People were having an open, spirited, passionate dialogue.
And let me just tell folks, for those of you who are listening right now, if you go to the blog post for this show today, I have a link directly to Daniel's video of the entire event, and he did an entire video of 4 hours worth of this event. So when he says what occurred, all of that is documented, so there can be no lies by board members or anything to say that things didn't occur the way he's detailing them right now. Continue, Daniel. Daniel. Okay, it seems like we lost Daniel for a while here. I imagine he'll call in a minute, and here he is. There we go. Go ahead, Daniel.
Oh, so we can't let that story just end there, because that is not the full story. Let me tell you.
Right.
People were having passionate, spirited dialogue, and then I guess they got a mite too passionate for President of the School Board, Rhonda Skillern-Jones, and she gavelled and called for the room to be cleared out. That decision was pivotal for what happened next, which was the cops came out to clear people out of the room. I guess they weren't clearing fast enough to be to the liking of the police officers, which, like I mentioned earlier, was double the normal presence. And eventually people began getting pushed and in some cases dragged around. 3 people were arrested last night. They're all out now. One person was released pretty quickly. They were detained and released. Two of them went to jail. Candace Weber, who's a Black Lives Matter Houston leader, was taken to prison last night. She was one of the two people who spent the night in jail. She has been released at this point. In fact, all three of them have been released. But it was at that point that the meeting flipped out of control. It was directly attributed to the decision of the president of the school board, Rhonda Skillen-Jones, to clear the room that led to that scenario. There was no need for the amount of security and the level of escalation that went on in that room. People were being dragged on the ground, and it was completely unfair, and it was an egregious overreach of power. Last night, a technicality, a respect-based technicality, if you will, a decorum technicality, was used to abuse power. But what happened next was very interesting. People stuck around for a very long time. They were pushed into the lobby, and then they were pushed outside of the building. And from there, they were told to clear the area of the door. But they stuck around to make sure they could do everything that they could to stand shoulder to shoulder with people who had been affected that night and let people know that there was not going to be a surrender on the school fight, that they were going to defend these schools and they were going to stick around, and that we were going to stick around as long as we could to do everything that we could to make sure that people were released from prison as well. We were out there for a long time. We were addressed only by two of the 9 trustees at the end of the night. Elizabeth Santos came out and Jolanda Jones came out. The board eventually voted to adjourn 8-1. Elizabeth Santos was one of the sole votes, was the sole vote against adjourning that evening. A vote to privatize, now it has come out, will not take place. The HISD school board has said that they will not be the ones to take a vote by April 30th to charter or corporate partner or privatize these schools. The mayor of the city of Houston has come out and said that he is in opposition to the corporate partnerization and charterization of these schools. And as it stands right now, the community has stood up and fought back against the regressive Texas education agency's attempt to sell out our schools in ways that, as usual, disproportionately affect poor kids in Black and brown communities.
Now, let me see if I get that right, because you're giving new news on the on this program right now. Are you saying that the board has rescinded the motion to attempt, in its attempt to charter these 10 public schools?
Essentially, yes. Right now, they said they're not going to head toward that. That is the word that we're hearing. Public officials and electeds have changed their minds in the past about things, so it's always a possibility. But that is what we are hearing at this point, that no partnerships, no charters, no closures is the line. And I think it became very clear last night that all of these different measures to control the scenario, control the environment, control what people said, be opaque instead of transparent about how what information is coming out, and this whole process, from down to the potential partners that they chose, has been a mistake, and it has been an outright war on education. And it finally reached a boiling point last night where people said absolutely not, and the school board reacted poorly to that. Instead of listening to everybody, the president cleared the room. But today, it appears that the trustees have said that they're not going to do that. We're going to hold them to that, and we're going to continue to fight the Texas education.
Now, folks, if you're just chiming in right now, please make sure to share this program on your wall. This is a very important program. This is not only an important program for what occurred last night, but for what Daniel Cohen, president of Indivisible Houston, has just told us, and that is the people won this portion of the battle. The battle is never over. The war is never over. We've won a battle, but not the war. In other words, the people rose up in opposition as the plutocracy attempted to privatize 10 schools in Houston, which would have just been the beginning. If that was successful, I guarantee you that this would have happened school after school after school after school till the entire privatization of the school system in this area would have occurred. It would have occurred in San Antonio. It would have occurred in Austin. It would have occurred in El Paso. It would have occurred in Dallas. Everywhere. So Daniel Cohen, Indivisible Houston, Pantsuit Republic, Swing Left, all these people that were out there fighting against a board that we cannot consider other than being rogue. I can't believe some of the folks that are on that board should know better. And I think that in as much as, even as they have not been successful in privatizing, in charterizing our schools, this must be the last time they serve on the board, folks. So share this program. And Daniel, I hope your work, well, I don't know how much politics Indivisible can get into, but folks that are listening now.
Well, I'll tell you. I'll tell you. No, so there is something important that you did strike on. This board is almost all women, and it is a diverse board, and many of them claim to be progressives. What this shows is if you do not hold politicians' feet to the fire, you still may not get the outcome that you like. It's important for us to work electorally as people in the world to fight for the things that we believe in. That I'm very, very comfortable saying, and I've never shied away from that. But on top of that, and what Indivisible Houston's focused on, is making sure to hold these politicians accountable for their actions. And so it doesn't matter how much you think they're a friend or foe, you need to make sure to hold them accountable and apply fire, particularly when it comes to school charterization and privatization. The war on public education doesn't stop at the border of HISD. It's Fort Worth to Florida. It's Ohio to Amarillo. It's New York to California. It's everywhere. They're coming to your hometown. We need to resurrect public education and defend it all the way down. No more of these charters that create more inequity than we ever had before, where certain kids are treated better than others in the district. No more shutting down these neighborhood schools and making kids bus halfway across cities. No more of this nonsense. Stand up. Fight back in your city, defend public education, whether you're in HISD or not. If you are in Houston, stand with us and fight for the Houston Independent School District and make sure that public education is defended and that these schools remain open so that these kids can learn and pursue the same opportunity that other kids can pursue. You can join the Save Our Schools Coalition. You can find out more about everything that we're putting out. There's 6 groups and growing at this point that are going to different places and advocating long term. So please make sure to get involved in the fight and push back in the war on public education.
Daniel, when you get a chance, I know you're on the phone right now, but when you get a chance, please go to the post for this video, this particular Facebook Live, and put some of those links in there. But I want to give a little soliloquy here with regards to charter schools, private schools, etc. I have no problem against private schools. If you want to send your kid to a private school, do so at your expense. Public school is part of the commons, and that means it's something that all of us are to partake of. There is absolutely no way for the same amount of money that you can have a charter school operate at the levels of a public school. People shouldn't be saying the public school is failing and thus let's have a charter school that transfers some of your wealth to a few people who own that school, which means they have to get that money from somewhere, which means paying teachers less. If you pay teachers less, you get what you pay for. If the other options that they have is to give less resources to the kids. So therefore, a charter school can absolutely, and this is an absolute statement, can never be more efficient than a public school. What is different is what you put into the public school as far as how that public school is run. If a public school is failing, fix the public school and make sure it stops failing. It doesn't require you to pay, to give profits to corporations. It doesn't require you to have a new administrative level that charges a whole lot of money above what is placed into education. So folks, do not be fooled by those great commercials you see on TV. Do not be fooled. I mean, I went and I looked at the charter school, the charter school that was going to be taking over those 10 schools. And I tell you something, the website is beautiful. The things that they talk about is beautiful. The advertising is beautiful. It's bunk. And let me tell you guys, a charter school cannot, I repeat, cannot be more efficient than a public school. A failing public school must be fixed. It must not be chartered. Daniel.
Oh, absolutely. No, that's. I mean, we have to put money into public education. Look, charter schools were originally an idea of a union president to try to, provide an option for kids that didn't have anywhere else to go. We've learned over time. You talk to any of these national public education advocates that public education was a better tack. Putting the dollars into public education works better. These charter school experiments have turned into aggressive entrepreneurial experiments that only further inequity in the school system and destroy public education. It's unfair, it's uncalled for, and it's inequitable. And the right thing to do is to make sure to fight back and protect public education in the United States. But the beauty of it is that the people can do it, that there's going to be a resurrection of public education like never before, and a belief in public education because it works and because it creates a more equitable situation. So stand up and fight back against the war for privatization.
Now, Daniel, let me just talk about the success that you guys had out there yesterday. For those who are just joining us, please, I have Daniel Cohen, president of Indivisible Houston, who was a part of the movement outside of the Houston Independent School District when they attempted to prostitute the schools by turning them over to a corporation. And because of what these people did, they prevented that from occurring. They fought back. The people fought back, and the rogue school board acquiesced. They adjourned. They acquiesced, and today the word is that from the mayor of the city all the way down to the board said privatization of the Houston Independent School District will not occur. Well, of course, we're dependent on all those parents to keep their eyes open to ensure that in fact that does not occur. We won't allow that to occur. Daniel, look, let me go ahead and check one thing here. I want to go ahead and check our page here to see if there's any questions for you. And if there are no questions here, What we'll do is we'll go off and go on to our second subject, which we're at about the time to move on to that subject. But I am very proud. I'm a very proud Houstonian right now that folks in Houston, Texas, after a rogue board, a board who got a few people arrested, were forced to back down. Folks, that is what's called people power. You have the power. It is you who elect people. It is you who make things happen. And if we hang together, those people who are being paid by the plutocracy, those people who are getting a few $1,000s to sell you out, still only have one vote. And there are more of you than there are of them. And once you keep that codified within your minds, then things work. Daniel, hang with me a little bit. Let me check to see if there are any specific questions on what you guys have accomplished yesterday. Sure. Let's see. We have here, vamos a ver. Let's see. At least do that before using ad hominem fallacies to disregard facts in my, I don't know what you're talking about, Mr. We have a few conservative friends here. I love everybody, as you know, Daniel, and every now and then, I know you guys give me a hard time for that, but I am going to continue loving every single American. Every single American.
I understand.
I am a fighter, but I fight in a special way. You know, we all fight differently. Okay, if we're going to talk about the MSN misinformation, okay, that's for the next time. We'll talk about that later. Just want to see if there's anything about the schools in here. Okay, Daniel, it looks like there aren't any questions in the schools that I can see here. But I can tell you what, this video will be out there forever. So therefore, I want you guys who are listening right now to go ahead and share what we're doing today. It is extremely important that folks not only here in Houston, not only here in Texas, but throughout the country realize that if you fight, you will win, because this country belongs to whom? To you. Thank you so kindly, Daniel, for having been with us.
Yep, thank you for covering this really important story, Egberto. We appreciate it, man.
Absolutely. You take care. Have a great one, buddy. Okay, folks, for the second part of the show today, we're going to talk Venezuela. Okay, and the reason I touched on Venezuela is because of an article that I read on FAIR. FAIR is one of those organizations that try to keep the media on their toes. It tries to ensure that the media is behaving itself. It tries to ensure that the media is not misleading you, misinforming you, etc., etc., etc. So when I saw the article, I said, "Oh my God, I've got to cover that," because if you've been listening to Donald Trump, and if you've been listening to a whole lot of other folks, they've been ringing that drum. You know, yes, we're talking about Iran. Yes, we're talking about North Korea. Yes, we're talking about Russia. Yes, we're talking about Syria. We're talking about all those different things. But guess what else we're talking about in the background? Oh, Venezuela is under siege. The people are starving in Venezuela. All those things are true, but it's not mutually exclusive to say that the plutocracy is trying to hold Venezuela by the pelotas. Okay? And so what I'm going to do is start with how we were going to do this, and that is start with the blog of the week, because that is where it comes in. So without further ado,
It's time for the weekly blog post.
okay, folks, here we go. This is very, very important. This is very important. It doesn't only talk. It's not only about Venezuela. It's about countries all over the world. And one of the problems we have in the United States of America is that we tend to concentrate on everything that is America and everything that is immediately American, and we don't concentrate on things on the outside of America. And what that means is our country is able to do a whole lot of bad things on the outside and tell us how many good things they're doing. And when bad things happen to good Americans out overseas, we sit down and say, why did they do that? Why were they so bad with us? A lot of times, and this is not to justify anyone attacking Americans or Americans attacking anyone, but we have to realize what our plutocracy has made our government do all over the world and what they could make it do. I've given you guys a story many a times that Manuel Antonio Noriega, the Panamanian dictator that Bush #1 overthrew, that Bush #1 killed 10,000 Panamanians to get his sole guilt, as far as the United States was concerned, was laundering money and they want to say selling drugs, but he didn't manufacture any drugs. He just laundered money. He was a capitalist. That's all he was. He laundered money for drugs. What does Trump launder money for? Hotels? I don't know. Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. But he was just following what the capitalists do. All right? And for that, 10,000 Panamanians died under the pretext that some people were getting harassed in Panama. Lies. What this report did is it showed lies that is occurring with Venezuela. Look, the people in Venezuela are suffering. Don't get me wrong. They're suffering, but it's not because they got themselves a democratic socialist government that's causing them to suffer. What's causing them to suffer is what the plutocracy, when these people who want to run the country control the means of production solely, they can actually hurt a country, and they are doing it with impunity. Okay, here it is. Venezuela, a clear example why one cannot trust the mainstream media. And here it goes. Every time I mention Venezuela and Hugo Chavez to my friends, whether on the right or the left, they all scoff. If there is one thing most of them agree on, is that Hugo Chavez was terrible and that Nicolás Maduro is corrupt. That is what the supposedly objective media would have you believe. But here is the truth. No politician is an angel. None. None whatsoever. Did Hugo Chavez do bad things? Yes. Did Nicolás Maduro do bad things? Yes. Did the Venezuelan plutocracy do bad things? Hell, they did bad things to the 20th power, to the X degree. Nothing a politician could do as badly as the plutocracy did to their own people, swimming on oil. So, no politician is an angel, but the plutocracy that drives them is worse. They create the environment, and many times the mainstream media acquiesces to their direction to shape the news. It was not too long ago when the Bush administration used New York Times' Judith Miller to pull the wool over Americans' eyes about the Iraq war. In other words, the mainstream media made a lie a plausible reality to many Americans who trusted them. Remember, every week, Judith Miller had a new story that said how bad Saddam Hussein was in having weapons of mass destruction and killing his people. All these things. We had a reputable New York Times under Judith Miller reporting these things that were really fuzzled or finagled to her via the White House. That is what our media did to us. Caused the death of hundreds of thousands. The mainstream media has done the same thing with Venezuela. FAIR exposes them with a classic example. I don't remember what FAIR stands for, but it's something about fairness in media or whatever. What is great is that they were able to find a near perfect similarity that shows it is deliberate. A similarity that shows it is deliberate. Joe Emersberger's article, Western Media Shorthand on Venezuela, conveys and conceals so much, is a must read. But here is the core of the hypocrisy. And I have a link to the article itself. But here's the core to the hypocrisy. A Reuters article reports that the European Union could impose further sanctions on Venezuela if it believes democracy is being undermined there. That's the headline. Check that out. Oh, the democracy in Venezuela, it's being undermined by Nicolás Maduro. Okay, the line nicely illustrates the kind, and please follow me here. This is so important for you to follow. The line nicely illustrates the kind of journalistic shorthand Western media have developed over years of repetition for conveying distortions and whitewashing gross imperial hypocrisy about Venezuela. A passing remark can convey and conceal much. And I continue. This is important, folks. Please listen. This is important. The EU's sincerity in acting on what it believes about Venezuelan democracy is unquestioned by the London-based Reuters. But meanwhile, Spain, an EU member, is pursuing the democratically elected president of Catalonia, Carlos Puigdemont, for the crime of organizing an illegal independence referendum last year. Weeks ago, he was arrested in Germany at Spain's request, and other elected representatives have been arrested in Catalonia, where Spain's federal government deposed the elected regional government after the referendum. Okay, so Spain said, to hell with your democratically elected government. Nope, it's unconstitutional. We're not going to have it. That's what an EU country said of a democratic election. Now, in July of 2017, a few months before the referendum in Catalonia, Venezuela's opposition also organized an illegal referendum. Same thing, illegal referendum meaning not constitutional referendum in Catalonia, in Spain. One occurred in Venezuela by their opposition. One of the questions asked if the military should obey the opposition-controlled National Assembly, which was an extremely provocative question given the opposition's various efforts to overthrow the government by force since 2002. You know, they've been trying to overthrow the government over and over again. The people won't let them. They thought they succeeded once and the people didn't let them. The people wanted the government they have. The referendum required an extremely high level of political expression, organization, and participation. It allegedly involves 7 million voters. The Venezuelan government disregarded the results, as Spain disregarded the Catalan referendum results. But, unlike Spain, did not jail people for organizing it or send police to brutally repress the voters. Again, they did so in Catalonia. They did not do that in Venezuela. All right? Remember, same thing occurred. One in the EU, meaning Spain is a part of the European Union, and one in Venezuela. The same thing occurred. A group of folks wanted to do their own thing. All right. Venezuelan voters, overwhelmingly government supporters since the opposition boycotted and did not field candidates, were violently attacked by opposition militants when they elected a constituent assembly. The attacks resulted in several deaths. Okay, the right wing came after they lost or they didn't participate, and they killed a whole bunch of folk. Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro has hardly failed to call attention to the hypocrisy of both the EU and Spain, but Reuters' article made no mention of it. They didn't mention the similarities. They didn't mention that these were two referendums that were unconstitutional. They didn't mention that in Spain, a part of the EU, the European Union, they brought it down violently and they arrested people, while in Venezuela, the opposite occurred, right? They did not arrest folk. the folks who tried the referendum, as well. The people who were doing the attacking were the right wing, who went ahead and attacked the folks that got elected after they didn't want to participate in the real election. And again, what did the lazy news do? It's not that the news was lazy. They weren't lazy. They knew what they were doing. One was Europe, one was South America. And you know what they like to do with those countries in South America? Those folks are different. No, that's not that those folks are different. Those folks have oil that we can take. Those folks have a plutocracy who we want to support, because that plutocracy pilfers its own people. Pilfers its own people. You're sitting on a swarm of oil. You give the oil companies royalties out, money out the gazoo to come and take your oil. You get a whole bunch of royalty, and since it's only a small amount to you in the plutocracy, you get a bunch. And to hell with the rest of your country. But somehow we want to believe. Let me finish the blog first. I must remind Americans of an important fact. Venezuela is sitting on one of the largest oceans of oil in the world. During the reign of the Venezuelan plutocracy, I can mention folks like Carlos Andrés Pérez and all these guys that ran Venezuela all this time, where you had the Venezuelan elite, but most people living in poverty. Look, man, I'm from Central America. This is something that is constant around there. You have the plutocracy, a very small amount of people that take all the resources in this area of the world. This area of the world is rich. Copper, iron, ganado, cattle and all that kind of stuff. South, Central, all these parts of America are rich in natural resources. The people are poor not that because the people want to be poor or there's corruption. They're poor because of a plutocracy that pilfers them. And when the people take over, because the plutocracy controls the means of production, they ice the people. They make them suffer. Continuing, the country has enough natural resources to ensure. Or let me back up. During the reign of the Venezuelan plutocracy, most Venezuelans lived in abject poverty. The country has enough natural resources to ensure a prosperous nation, but the spoils went to foreign companies and the country's plutocracy. Shouldn't one question, what was the genesis of Hugo Chavez? What was the genesis of Hugo Chavez? Do you think somebody like Hugo Chavez just blossoms because he's good looking or something like that? He came out of a necessity of the poor, a necessity of those that have been taken advantage of. And when they saw him, they saw Simón Bolívar. That's what they saw. Why he talked about the Bolivian states of America. What he wanted to do if he had lived. Because of the pilfering he's understood, those in the South American plutocracy would bring or continue to bring on to them. Folks, it's hard for Americans to listen to this kind of stuff because we've been lied to for so long. But I ask all Americans in general to do one thing. If you're sitting on a mountain, on an ocean of oil, if your plutocracy was in existence way before Hugo Chavez, and under your plutocracy, under this capitalist plutocracy, the people suffered. The people were poor. How then can you not expect there to be a Hugo Chavez? How can you not expect an Hugo Chavez? The theft of the country's natural resources for the benefit of a few did. And with all of his faults, he took care of the poor. But when the plutocracy, or when a plutocracy controls much of production and works in concert, they can cripple a country. And then it is easy to fool many that it is the government and not the thieves with a record of stealing that is to be blamed. Folks, it's hard after you've been lied to over and over and over again. After you believe the lies over and over again. Oh, Chavez is some communist that doesn't care about the market or doesn't care about freedom. Look, let me tell you something. Do you think in America, the biggest capitalist country in the world, you're free? Read my book, As I See It, Class Warfare, the Only Resort to Right-Wing Doom. And why am I mentioning that? Because I talk about all the facets within our economy that makes you a slave. from the patent system right down to the shareholder system, to the taxation system, we are mostly slaves to a few. And we have a hard time seeing it because we are so indoctrinated. The Cato Institute, the Heritage Foundation, all these institutions were created via or under the behest of the Powell Manifesto. When Lewis Powell, a Democrat who eventually was assigned to the Supreme Court by Richard Nixon, realized that Americans were becoming intelligent, Americans were becoming liberal, Americans were becoming progressive. They were starting to see, why is it that we are doing all the work for these corporations, but we are not getting the spoils? How come that shareholder that is sitting down at his pool is getting all the money? How is that possible? I am working, he gets the money. Not only does he get the money, but he even pays a lower tax rate than I do. The plutocracy, folks, that guy who owns the company, the shareholders, he can sit at his pool and make the money off of your labor and pays less in income tax than you do. And you know what they say? Well, he's risking his income. He's risking his assets. He's risking his capital. Well, when you are building a bridge, you're risking your life. You're risking your limb. You're risking everything else. I thought in America we were a moral country who put life over everything else. But now we're saying, no, there's something special about capital. So him risking his capital or her capital deserves better than us risking our lives. Those people who built the Boulder Dam, known now as the whatever dam, I don't know how come I came up with Boulder Dam, but you know what I mean, the one on the Colorado River. You know how many people died building that? Those people who risk limb every day they go to work. Those people who drive their cars every day to work, they stand a bigger risk of getting hurt than that guy sitting in his pool just by owning a few shares. Because he owns capital, he's worth more. Because he owns capital, his money is treated differently than your money. You're working with your hands, with your brains for your money. Folks, if you're just tuning in, please go ahead and share this on your Facebook page. Please go ahead and share this all throughout. But folks, it is so important for us to really understand this. We are in a closed loop in America. We're in a closed loop. And that loops revolve around indoctrination. In other words, we're indoctrinated, and as the indoctrination comes around and somebody tries to indoctrinate you, you flow right back to that indoctrination and say what you are saying can't be true because I learned this. The cyclical nature of ignorance in the way we were taught is what makes it dangerous, is what makes us accepting of what we need not accept. It is what makes us scared of saying we want a guaranteed job. And the first thing we think about is, well, who's going to pay for that? The second thing, or that we want to fix infrastructure now, and we say we can't afford that. Or we say we want health care for all, and we say, but that is too expensive. Absolutely not. They have taught us to work within a framework, an economic framework. This economic framework is man-made. Look, if there are potholes all over the place, if there are sick people out there are jobs that need to be done. And if your economic system is unable to fulfill those jobs, it's a failed economic system. And that is where we have to start thinking of as a country. As a country, we have to start thinking like this economic system cannot have Medicare for all, that this economic system cannot have employment for all, that this economic system cannot keep up with its infrastructure, means it's a failed economic system, nothing more. That's how we judge things. They either work or they don't. The question then is, how do you fix a failed system? As you know, because I mean, it's like, how do you repair a heart, right? A heart has to stay beating so that you can continue living. And if you have to make repairs to that beating heart, you have to create some sort of technology to do it. But you know what? That's a good thing with an economy. You can do that. You can phase things in. You can start the transition. But you see, that transition means something to others, right? It means that the way they have been used to doing things over and over again, there's some ambiguity Am I going to be really top chain? Well, you know what? I really don't give a damn if you're going to be top chain anymore. I don't care if Bill Gates is going to have billions because he didn't earn it anyway. I don't care if Bezos is going to be the richest man in the world because he didn't earn it anyway. Everybody else earned the money and he capitalized on it. Remember that. Everybody else earned the money on his idea and then he capitalized on your labor, your intellect, your technology. But we have learned, you know, there was a time it was just black folk or Indians or whatever who thought, who had that mentality, who had that slave mentality. But the Powell Manifesto has ensured that now all Americans, or not all Americans, but a large percentage of Americans now have a slave mentality. And that slave mentality says this: I need to follow the way he says it works. Even though we can see materially it failing. And if it is failing, it means it does not work. So what I am trying to do with politics done right, and many of us within this domain, is to try to enlighten people. You no longer need to sit down there and just believe how things have always been. Because things have always been a certain way, don't mean that it has to remain that way. Because you've been doing things a particular way doesn't mean you have to do it that way. We have a brain and we can actually change things. As Daniel Cohen was on with all those great brave folks yesterday who forced that rogue board, that board that was going to sell out, that board that was going to prostitute its kids in 10 public schools, which would have grown throughout the state. They said, no mas. We're not going to take it anymore. We're absolutely not going to take it anymore. And that is what I'm hoping. That is what I'm begging. That's what I'm really working towards. That's why we have Politics Done Right and other programs like this that I want to succeed. The reason why is the goal of these programs is to tell Americans throughout this country, we do not have to acquiesce. We do not have to acquiesce to the status quo. We can actually make a difference. And that is what I want us to start doing, making a difference. Let me get to the see if anybody wants to add to the discussion. So let me go pull this baby up. But folks, I hope you were listening to what I said, because it is at first it becomes hard. I mean, before I kind of identified in my psyche that I would never conform. I never conformed when I had my own company. I did it my way. And I don't think anybody should conform to failure. And that is what many of us do. We conform, we defend, and in conforming and defending, we allow others to control. All right, let me go ahead and go through these. Okay. I've been going to talk about MSM misinformation. How about we talk about them giving Trump $5 billion in free airtime? That is so true. Trump got so much free airtime, very few of us could. In truth, and Michael Rudd and I did read that story about the guy who said Donald Trump, the one thing he's right about is we should get the hell out of Syria. I listened to what he had to say, and you know what? I actually agree with him. Or we can finally discuss Jeffrey Sachs on MSNBC. I think that's what we just spoke about. Michael C. Sachs. Michael Trump. Trump is right. Media is very negative. Okay. I can't disagree with you, Michael. Mike Cizak. Mike Cizak, that's not the point. Okay, that was a reply to that. If the media had done their job on Hillary, Bernie would have been the DNC candidate. I learned the other day that the Clinton campaign may have laundered about $84 million in what might be the single largest campaign finance scandal in history. And that, for all practical purposes, crap, my dear friend Mike Cizak, because if that were the case, that would have been found already. Yeah, heaven forbid that parents should have a choice in the education of their kids. That's not a choice. That's not a choice. That's a sellout. Okay, they can have a choice. Just pay for their choice. We provide public education as a part of the commons. If somebody wants education away from everybody else, that's fine. There's nothing that's going to stop you from doing that. Just go pay for it yourself. Don't ask the taxpayers to pay for it. And don't say you want your portion of the taxpayers' money, because I could go ahead and say, I don't use that freeway. Why am I paying for a piece of that freeway? No, that's not how it works at all. All right, let's see. Michael Gibson, Mike Cizek. I read that too. It was from the Federalist. Okay, saw that. Let me see what else I have here. Mike Cizek, investors is a bad source. Factual reporting, mixed notes. Investor Business Daily is an American media company covering international business, finance, and economics and the stock market. Allow lobbyists. Yes, I know about that. Let's see, Michael. Let's see what else I have here. Para ver. A charter school is often cheaper and better than a public school. That is a patently false statement. And not only is it patently false, Mr. Cizek, we can prove that it's patently false. There is no study that have shown that in the aggregate, charter schools do better. You can always have a rich charter school, like we have rich public schools, which somehow do better than public schools in the ghetto or the barrios or Appalachia. And the reason why is in our infinite wisdom, as opposed to putting more money into the areas where need the money. I mean, if you're in a depressed area, it comes to that you would think more money would go into that portion of education, but that's not how it goes. We have several schools here in Kingwood and Humboldt and the other areas. Kingwood is a fairly upscale area, and that school, you can see that it gets the money. And then you go to other schools and you can see the deprivation in those schools. So please, we know the inequity is man-made, and not only that, the inequity is in how these school boards themselves distribute the money to the different schools. They're always able to find the reason why some upper class school within the same district is getting more so than the others. So folks, don't fall into that. Let's see. Michael Rudnin, one question: what was the genesis of Hugo Chavez? The theft of the country's natural resources for the benefit of a few did. Exactly. Let's say Milton Gibson, the poor people of Venezuela are suffering. The plutocrats are doing fine or have left the country. Yes, and while they could get monies out in some special ways, they did. And remember, you don't only have to get monies out in dollars or whatever their currency is. You can actually do it in buying things like you can go ahead over there and buy gold or buy something else and ship the gold out, and hey, somehow you got your transfer of your money out of this country. There are a lot of ways that these evil folks do it. Mike Cizek brings up an interesting point. Care to comment? Let's see what that interesting point is. The thieves were government employees. How did Chavez and his daughter become multi-billionaires? The striking oil workers were all fired, and Chavez put all of his politically connected folks in control of the oil company. This is blaming of the plutocracy is a complete fabrication. No, it's not a fabrication. As I mentioned quite aptly early on in the conversation, first of all, there's nothing new about corrupt politicians. There's nothing new about Hugo Chavez not being a saint. Absolutely not. Would I be foolish to somehow think he didn't get some money under the fence as well? I would never ever protect or defend any politician. However, what I will say is, unlike the plutocracy, these folks didn't take all the spoils. The plutocracy took all the spoils and left the country for the decades that it controlled the country in despair. Under Hugo Chavez, the poor people did just fine. They started to grow out of poverty. They started to start their little companies. They started to do a whole lot of things, and they had something known as, well, it was Brazil that had the thing called the bolsa, where there was a minimum amount of food that you get, that sort of a thing. So no, I am not going to argue with Mike Cizek when it comes to saying that that Hugo Chavez did some bad things. But doing bad things and doing good things are not mutually exclusive. Let's continue. Mike Run reminds me of all resource cursed countries rich in resources have poor people due to corruption. True. Yet countries like Hong Kong and Taiwan that don't have any natural resources other than people are doing well because the free market is kept. Look, you can call capitalism free markets if you want to. You can call it whatever you want to do it. But you know what? It isn't the case at all. Capitalism isn't what saved well, let me back up. Unfettered capitalism did work in Hong Kong because that is all they did, right? I mean, they're just pushing paper, but they really produce nothing. So using that as a small country, simply working on capital basis, I am not going to allow that, or I can't say I'm not going to allow that, but that is not the case. And by the way, thanks Gibson, Boulder Damage Relay, Hoover Dam. Folks, we were at the end of the show. This went pretty quickly. These shows are going rather quickly. I guess we cover a whole lot of material. I wish more of you would call in so that I wouldn't have soliloquies for that long of a time. But folks, I'd like to remind you that it's amazing. I'm only doing one pitch today because I had Daniel Cohen here today. But what I'd like to ask you guys is, for those who are watching the program today, I'd love for you to become subscribers. Subscribe to Politics Done Right. That is the only way we survive. That is the only way we can continue doing this. Doing this endeavor has been very, very, very expensive. It has been more expensive than one would believe, doing this completely full time. And what we want to do is ensure that you feel rewarded. So we'll take care of you. Go to Patreon, patreon.com/politics done right. patreon.com/politics done right. Become a subscriber of this program. I think it is very important for us to support all progressive programs, shows, radio, rags that we can. As I've mentioned before, I don't ask you to do what I don't do. I'm a subscriber to Op-Ed News. I'm a subscriber to Daily Coast. I'm a subscriber to the Democratic Underground. I'm a subscriber to Coffee Party. I'm a subscriber to DHCP and several others. So please do your part and subscribe to some of those as well, or others that you like. But please, I ask humbly that you make Politics Done Right be a part of your the progressive base that you support. My name is Egberto Willies. This is Politics Done Right. Thank you so kindly for being a part of the show. You have a wonderful rest of the day.
Welcome to Politics Done Right. I am your host, Egberto Willies. This is the progressive program that will take the mystery out of politics. This is the program that will encourage you to make sure government becomes we the people. Whether you are liberal, conservative, or otherwise, you get to air your point of view. Remember, you can also send me a tweet to EGBERTOWILLIES. That is at Egberto Willies. Let us engage. It is Politics Done Right.
1, 2, 3, 4.